Damien Owusu was not supposed to be anything. That was not something his family said out loud. No one ever walked up to the small, quiet boy and told him directly that he had no future. But silence can say what words never could. And in the Owusu household, the silence around Damien said everything. He was born on a cold Tuesday morning in a small hospital on the edge of Accra, Ghana. His mother, Abena, held him the moment he arrived and cried, not from sadness, but from a kind of desperate love that only mothers understand. She had prayed through the entire pregnancy. She had asked God for one thing, that her son would be healthy and strong. The doctors told her the truth gently. Damien had a rare condition affecting his muscles. His limbs were underdeveloped. He would walk, yes. He would grow, yes. But he would never be physically powerful in the way that men in their community were expected to be. He would always be smaller, always be weaker, always be, by the world's rough standards, less. His father, Chief Kofi Owusu, was a tall and respected man. He had big hands, a wide chest, and a reputation in the village that was built on strength and discipline. When the nurses placed Damien in his arms for the first time, he looked at the boy for a long moment. Then he handed him back to Abena, nodded once, and walked out of the room. That walk, that quiet, wordless exit, became the story of Damien's childhood. Growing up, Damien watched other boys the way someone watches a world they know they cannot enter. The boys in his neighborhood wrestled in the red dust of the compound yard. They raced each other down the unpaved roads. They climbed the old mango trees and dropped from branch to branch without fear. They punched each other in the arms as a form of greeting, and they laughed loudly and moved through the world like they owned it. Damien sat on the low concrete wall near the gate and watched. He was not sad all the time. He had his mother's warmth and her stories. He had books, which a kind neighbor had started giving him when he was 7 years old. He had a sharp mind that noticed everything, the way the older boys formed their social groups, who led and who followed, how a single act of courage could change a person's standing in one afternoon. But the nickname found him anyway. The boys called him the soft one. They did not mean it as a playful tease. They meant it as a label, a permanent description of what he was and what he would always be. Even some of the adults used it when they thought he was out of earshot. His older brother, Kwaku, was everything Damien was not, physically. Kwaku was loud and broad-shouldered by his teenage years. He moved with the casual confidence of someone who had never once doubted his place in the world. Their father trained Kwaku personally. He took him to meetings. He introduced him to elders and businessmen with a proud hand on his shoulder. Damien was never taken anywhere. He told himself it did not hurt. He got very good at telling himself that. The man who changed the direction of Damien's life did not know he was doing it at the time. His name was Mr. Asante, and he taught primary school with the tired dedication of someone who had been doing the job for 20 years and still believed in it. One afternoon, he found Damien sitting alone under the big mango tree behind the school building, long after every other child had gone home. Damien was reading a torn mathematics textbook, not because he had been told to, but because the problems inside it felt like puzzles that had clean, satisfying answers. Mr. Asante sat beside him without asking permission. He was quiet for a while. Then he reached into his old leather bag and pulled out a book with a faded cover and bent corners. He set it on top of Damien's textbook. "Read this when you finish that one," he said. He stood up and left. No long speech. No explanation. The book was Think and Grow Rich. Damien read it in 4 days. He did not understand every word, but one idea lodged itself deep inside him like a nail driven into wood, that the mind, when trained and directed with purpose, is the most powerful force a person can carry, that a man is not defined by what his body can lift, but by what his mind can build. He was 9 years old. He did not have the language yet to explain what shifted inside him that week. But something shifted. From that point forward, Damien read everything he could find. His mother bought him books when she could afford to. Mr. Asante lent him more. The small local library became his second home. He read about economics, history, human psychology, leadership, and business. He read stories of people who had started with nothing and built something remarkable. He underlined sentences that felt true and wrote questions in the margins when something confused him. While Kwaku trained his body, Damien trained his mind. He did it quietly, without announcing it to anyone, because he had learned early that quiet work is the kind that no one can take from you. The worst moment of Damien's young life came when he was 17. His father organized a large family gathering, the kind that brought aunts, uncles, cousins, and community elders together under one roof. There was food and music, and the comfortable noise of a big family catching up. Damien had dressed carefully that evening. He had hoped, in the way that young people hope for things they cannot admit even to themselves, that this occasion might be different. Halfway through the evening, Chief Kofi Owusu stood up to make an announcement. He spoke warmly about the family's legacy. He talked about the land, the transport business he had built over 30 years, and the importance of passing something meaningful to the next generation. He spoke about responsibility and honor, and what it means to carry a family name with dignity. Then he looked at Kwaku and said his name with the kind of pride that fills a room. He did not say Damien's name, not once, not even at the end, where a simple mention, a single word, would have cost nothing and meant everything. Damien sat in the back of the room. He did not cry. He did not stand up. He sat very still and looked at the floor, and felt something inside him go quiet, in a way that was different from sadness. It was colder than sadness. It was the feeling of a door being shut, not slammed, just gently, firmly closed. He left that night with a small bag, a borrowed phone, and enough money for a bus ticket to Kumasi. He told his mother where he was going. She held his face in both her hands for a long moment, and said nothing. Then she let him go. Kumasi did not care about his family name. That was, in a strange way, the first freedom Damien had ever felt. He was 22 by the time he had settled into the city's rhythm. He worked 3 jobs: morning data entry at a logistics company, afternoon deliveries for a small shop, and evening phone sales for a telecommunications firm. He shared a room with 5 other young men. The mattress on the floor was not comfortable. The food was simple, and sometimes not enough. But Damien was not miserable. He was focused. He saved every small amount he could. He kept a notebook where he tracked every income and every expense with the precision of a man who understood that money, like attention, goes where you direct it. At night, when the room was loud with conversation and the city was still buzzing outside the window, he read business case studies, financial reports, stories of companies that had failed and why, stories of companies that had survived and how. The logistics company where he did his morning data entry was called Frimpong Freight. It was owned by a middle-aged man named Mr. Frimpong, who had built it with his own hands over 15 years and was now watching it slowly fall apart. The routes were inefficient, the costs were rising, the staff were confused about their roles, the records were a mess. Damien saw all of this within his first 3 months. He said nothing, because nobody had asked him. He was 22, and he sat in the corner and entered numbers into a spreadsheet. But in his own notebook, after hours, he began writing down what he saw: problems, causes, solutions. And he laid it out the way he had always organized his thoughts, clearly, step by step, with numbers to support every point. One late evening, working alone in the office after everyone had gone home, he made a decision. He took 3 sheets of paper. He wrote out the full restructuring plan, cash flow corrections, better route planning, staff role clarification, cost reduction areas. He wrote simply, so any reader could understand it immediately. He folded the pages, walked to Mr. Frimpong's office, and slid them under the door. Then he went home, and did not sleep well. His phone rang at 5 in the morning. Mr. Frimpong's voice on the other end was not angry. It was something more surprising than anger. It was quiet, careful, curious. "Come to the office early," the man said. "I want to talk." The meeting lasted 2 hours. Mr. Frimpong had read every word on those 3 pages. He had questions, sharp, direct questions that told Damien the man was not just reading but thinking. Damien answered each one calmly. When he did not know something, he said so. When he had a strong view, he explained his reasoning clearly. By the end of the meeting, Mr. Frimpong leaned back in his chair and looked at the thin young man sitting across from him, the one who weighed less than most of his delivery drivers and had no formal business degree. and made a decision that surprised even himself. He offered Damien a 12% ownership stake in the company. In exchange, Damien would lead the restructuring personally. Damien accepted without hesitation. What followed was 18 months of the hardest and most satisfying work of his life. He reorganized the routes and cut fuel costs by nearly a third. He restructured the payment system so that clients paid on time. He gave every staff member a clear role and held short weekly meetings so that problems were caught early. He was always the smallest person in any room at Frimpong Freight. The drivers were bigger, the warehouse workers were bigger. Even the receptionist was physically larger than him. Nobody cared after the third month, because results do not care about the size of the person producing them. Revenue tripled in a year and a half. The company that had been slowly dying began to breathe again, and then to grow. Word traveled the way it always does in a close business community, quietly, then all at once. By 26, Damien had co-founded his own logistics and supply chain firm. He called it Owusu Link. He started with 7 employees, 2 rented trucks, and a small office space that smelled like paint and ambition. He treated every client as if they were the most important account the company had, because in the beginning, they were. By 28, he had 140 employees. By 30, Owusu Link was operating across 3 regions of Ghana, with international partnerships beginning to form. A well-known West African business publication ran a feature on him with the headline, "The Quiet Force Reshaping Ghana's Logistics Sector." There was a photograph of Damien in his office, standing by the window, looking out at the city. He looked calm. He looked like someone who had always known this was where he was going. He did not raise his voice in meetings. He did not demand attention when he entered a room. He did not need to. There is a particular kind of presence that comes from a person who has spent years building something real. It does not announce itself. It simply is. People began to seek his advice. Young entrepreneurs came to him with ideas and questions. Established businessmen invited him to roundtable discussions. He answered every message he could and turned down the meetings that would waste other people's time. His mother came to visit the Kumasi office one afternoon and stood in the lobby looking at the framed company values on the wall. Words like integrity, excellence, and quiet determination. She touched the frame lightly with one hand. She did not say anything, she just nodded slowly. Damien stood beside her and felt, for the first time in his life, completely at peace. The moment that completed the story came at his father's 65th birthday celebration. It was a large, public event held in their home village, the same village where a teenage boy had once sat in the back of a room and not heard his name called. The whole community came. There was music and food, and the sound of a family and a village honoring a man who had worked hard and lived long. Kweku was there too, but he was quieter than usual. The family transport business, the one that had been placed in his hands with so much ceremony, had struggled badly in recent years. Poor decisions, money that had been spent without a plan, contracts that had fallen through. The business was on the edge of closing completely. 3 days before the birthday celebration, Damien had arranged a full financial rescue of the business. He did not make a dramatic phone call about it. He did not present a grand offer with conditions and applause. He spoke with his mother, confirmed the numbers, and transferred the funds. The accountant handling the business received the paperwork quietly and professionally. Damien told no one at the party. His father found out 3 days after the celebration ended. Someone in the accounting process mentioned the name. Chief Kofi Owusu went still when he heard it. He asked for confirmation. He received it. He drove to Kumasi himself. He did not call ahead. Damien was in a meeting when his assistant knocked on the door and said, with a slightly confused expression, that an older man was in the lobby and would not give his name, but had said simply that he was the boy's father. Damien walked out to the lobby. His father was standing near the entrance, holding his hat in both hands, looking at the office around him, the staff moving with purpose, the phones ringing, the quiet, organized energy of a place that worked well. He looked older than Damien remembered. He also looked, for the first time in Damien's memory, uncertain. They sat together in the small meeting room near the lobby. No staff, no audience. Just the two of them and 30 years of silence between them. His father did not give a prepared speech. He was not that kind of man. He sat across from his son for a long moment, looking at his hands. Then he stood up slowly, walked around the table, and placed both hands on Damien's shoulders. The way a chief does when honoring someone. The way a father does when words are not enough. He held that position for a long moment. Then he sat back down. They talked for 2 hours. About the business. About the family. About the future. It was the longest conversation Damien had ever had with his father. At the end of it, before he stood to leave, Chief Kofi Owusu looked at his son directly and said, "You became more than I ever imagined." Damien nodded. "I know, Papa," he said quietly. "I know." Today, Damien Owusu is 34 years old. He still walks with a slight physical limitation from the condition he was born with. His handshake is not the crushing grip of a man built for heavy labor. He is not the loudest voice in any room he enters. He employs more than 300 people. He funds 3 full scholarships every year for young boys from underprivileged communities. Specifically boys who have been overlooked, told they were too small, too quiet, too weak to matter. He mentors young entrepreneurs across Ghana, Togo, and Nigeria. He shows up to those mentorship sessions without a team or a camera crew, just him and a notebook and the time to listen. He renamed the family transport business in his father's honor and returned it, fully recovered, to his brother to run. He asked for nothing in return. In an interview given to a business journal in 2023, a young journalist asked him one final question. What would you say to the boy who sat in the back of that room at 17 and did not hear his name called? Damien was quiet for a moment. He looked out the window the way he often does when he is thinking carefully. Then he said, "I would tell him that silence is not the end of the story. Sometimes it is the beginning. I would tell him that the people who do not call your name are not writing your future. Only you are writing your future. And I would tell him, keep going. Quietly, consistently, keep going. Because one day, the whole room will feel you walk in, and you will not need anyone to announce you." He smiled then, not a wide performance smile, but the small, steady smile of a man who has lived through something and come out the other side knowing exactly who he is. Some people are born into power. Damien Owusu built his. Brick by quiet brick, year by determined year, from the ground up. And every person whose life he has touched since then knows one simple truth. The most powerful force in the world is not the loudest voice, or the strongest body, or the biggest name. It is a human being who decided, against every reason not to rise.